Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today we're going to be going over the London system. And it's a very solid opening, and a lot of players ask me, hey Kevin, I'm new to chess. What is a great opening that I should start playing with right away? Usually I try to tell people, find out if you're aggressive or not aggressive, but for today I'm going to go ahead and recommend the London system for all new chess players that want to get into the game and try out a new opening. Now that's not to say if you're a experienced chess player, this is not a good opening for you, because I think it can be, but the London system really allows you to develop your pieces early and correctly, and at the same time you're not going to get any crazy and wild tactical lines that some of the other openings that I discuss will get into. So with that said, the opening starts with pawn to d4. Now this is the London system, it's not the London opening, so there are a few variations that you may see as far as how to come about these lines. And so we'll go over a few of them, but the main idea is that your bishop, your dark square bishop, is going to come to f4 early on. Now maybe not the second move, a lot of times we'll develop our knight here to f3 first, but our bishop, our dark square bishop, is going to come to f4. As you can see early on, this is a little different than what you may be accustomed to when you play white. Most times you develop your light square bishop first, and then you develop your knights and get them involved, and usually the last minor piece that you get involved is your dark square bishop. And a lot of players, especially early on in their chess career, will tend not even to get their dark square bishop involved in the game, and it becomes the end game and they realize, I haven't even moved my bishop from this c1 square. So the London system is very good, even for those players that are experienced, but they say, what, I'm very good, playing with white, but I never seem to get my dark square bishop into the game. This is going to get it involved early on, so you may want to take a look at it if you're one of those players that we just talked about. Now from here there are a few variations you may see from black. You may see pawn to d5. We're going to develop our knight to f3. They could now bring their knight to f6, and now we're going to bring our bishop to f4. Now again, they don't have to play this. If they don't play this, they could play f6 right away, and then we develop our knight to f3, and they could from here play e6, and then again we're going to bring our bishop to f4, or they could try to fianchetto their bishop to g7 early on. They could play g6 right here, and then again we're going to bring our bishop to f4. And so these three moves right here from white are going to be pretty much the same across the board: pawn to d4, knight to f3, and bishop to f4. And as you can see from black here, a lot of times with this opening, black will play some sort of a King's Indian defense, and the London system in itself plays really well against the London defense. And why is that? So a player that's playing a King's Indian defense is really looking to build up a defense, a hyper-modern defense, and then attack the center, or attack some sort of weakness that white has. What white's really doing in the London system, it's not really attacking one side or the other. It's really just building up all his pieces and developing them into the center, and then kind of trying to strangle all of black's opportunities in the middle, and not really allowing black any counterplay in the chess game at all. So that's why it usually works well against the King Indian defense, because by the time black's ready to counterattack, there's no room for them to move, and so that usually works out really well for white. Now from here, once we have our dark square bishop out, we can bring our pawn to e3. Obviously we want to bring our dark square bishop out before we block it in with our pawn to e3. Eventually we'll bring our pawn to c3, and we're kind of going to solidify our pawn chain here in the middle. Now these pawns here eventually on e3 and c3 are not directly attacking the center or controlling the center, but again we are just building a solid center control with our pawns, and then eventually we can continue to develop our minor pieces. A lot of times we'll bring our light square bishop to d3, and we'll bring our other knight here to d2. So these are just some of the ideas that you'll want to think about when you play the London system. Now keep in mind, a lot of times you may not even castle your king when you play the London system. Keep in mind that you castle for a few reasons. One, you obviously want to connect your rooks, but the second is you really want to have king safety. Also in the London system, your center is actually going to be one of the safest places on the board. So a lot of times, experienced London system players will develop all their minor pieces, and then instead of castling, they will just start to attack maybe the king side, and instead of castling on the queen side, they will just start to move their king up the board, trying to get their king centralized if they do go into the end game, and their rooks are already going to be connected as their minor pieces are already developed. I also wanted to go over a famous game by Kovacevic, who wrote a book on the London system. It was played in 1980, and it kind of goes over a lot of the concepts and themes that we've kind of been talking about. So starts with pawn to d4, knight f6, knight f3, pawn to d5, bishop to f4, and then pawn to e6, again very common for black here. And then we're going to bring our knight to d2. Again, we kind of talked about where all of our pawns and pieces will eventually end up. He decided to already bring his knight to d2. Again, we don't bring our knight to c3 because we do want to solidify our pawn chain with our pawn here on c3. And at the same time, it's always good to bring your knight to d2 to also give a little bit more support to your knight here on f3. And since you're not immediately trying to dominate the center, then you don't need your knight here on c3 to attack and defend this center. So it continues from here with pawn to c5, and we bring our pawn to e3, again starting to solidify the center pawn structure that we talked about. And black's going to bring his bishop to e7, getting ready to castle on the king side, and we bring our pawn to c3. Our pawn structure is complete, as we already talked about, this kind of triangle here. And after black castles, then we bring our bishop to d3. And this is kind of what we were talking about before. These are kind of where all your pieces belong. Now keep in mind that you may have a slight variation depending on where black plays, since two sides get to play. This may not occur all the times, but if black were to just let you play and develop your pieces as you would want, this is kind of the setup that you want. You want your pawn chain to look like this. You obviously have your dark square bishop outside the pawn chain because we developed it very early on. Then you have your knights here on f3 and d2 with your light square bishop very nicely placed on this d3 square. Again, this light square bishop is not attacking the f square, the f7 square, and at the same time it's not directly attacking the center squares or trying to control it. Again, we're just kind of waiting, building up a strong central control, and then we're going to decide what we want to do here. Black decided to bring his knight to d7, which kind of is the same as what we did with our knight to d2. And from here, white has an option. Obviously, he wants to eventually get his queen involved, and then he wants to connect his rooks. But white decided to go ahead and play pawn to h4. And what this says right off the bat to black is saying, you know what, my center is completely safe. I don't need to castle right now because my king is safe. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to attack the king side, and that's exactly what white did. Now in your own game, this may not be the best option for you. Black may castle on the queen side, he may not castle at all, he may try to counterattack before you have a chance to do this. But as you can see, there are a lot of different options that white has. In this case, he already built up a strong center, and he decided that it was okay for him to go ahead and attack on the king side. So from here, black played b6. I guess he didn't really understand the threat that was coming his way. White continued with knight to e5, just trying to break up some of this defense that black has here. And after black took, white took with his pawn on e5, attacking this knight here, really trying to get this knight to move. Since again this knight is defending this pawn on h7, he really wants to free up where his light square bishop here on d3 can really start to get involved in this attack here. After the knight moves back to d7, white's going to sacrifice his bishop here on h7. He really wants to get this king out in the open and really start to attack it. So after the king comes to h7 and recaptures, we now bring our queen to h5. So as you can see, we've really started to get all of our pieces involved here. And again, yes, we did sacrifice a bishop, but at the same time, we have a lot more active pieces. As you can see here, this rook here on a8 isn't doing anything. This bishop, more importantly, isn't doing anything here on c8. So yes, we are down a bishop, but in the same time, this light square bishop for black isn't doing anything. And as you can see, our dark square bishop is the bishop that's usually not developed very often for white. And so we see the exact same thing here for black. His light square bishop is not developed into the game. And so even though we're down a bishop, since his light square bishop isn't in the game, it's pretty much a wash, because now we have more active pieces. His king is out in the open, and we've started the attack here. So again, I've talked about it before, it's not always how many pieces you have, it's how many active pieces you have attacking your opponent. So in this case, although we are down in material, he does have pieces that are inactive, and we have much stronger attacking prowess than he does. So just keep that in mind whenever you're playing chess. If you can sacrifice a bishop even though you're down in material, if they have an inactive bishop on their side, it may be worth it. So from here, black brought his king back to g8, and then white played knight to f3, and then after pawn to f6, white played knight to g5. And you may ask why he did this. He really wants to get rid of this pawn on h4. If he could, he would just take it away, because then he would have this really strong attack with this queen, with this rook here on h1, supporting it. So he's going to do whatever he can, even if he has to sacrifice another piece here on g5 to get rid of this pawn here from h4. So he's going to go ahead and give that piece up, and he's going to recapture with his pawn on g5. So we've already given up a bishop and a knight, but at the same time you can see a very powerful attack coming here. Again, if we wanted to, we could even castle on the queen side and get another rook involved, connect our rooks, and really start to attack. But right away, we have a lot of the attacking power that we need here with our queen here on h5, our rook here on h1, and this king very exposed. So from here, black brought his rook to f5, and white brought his queen to h7, starting the attack. And after the king came to f7, white continued to push his pawn up the board, checking. There's not much room for black to play here. He brought his king to e8, and after white took on g7, the bishop came to f8, and the queen came back to h8, and I'll just continue some of the moves. Rook to g5, queen to g8, rook coming down to e5, capturing this knight on e5. The king really trying to move away here, knowing that a lot of the pain is coming. And so now we brought the rook to h8, really starting to attack. And the bishop came to b7, trying to get involved in the game, but it's a little too late for this light squared bishop. And after king to h7, then black resigned here. There's just too much for black to cope with. And again, we have our dark squared bishop very nicely placed here on e5. Again, this all started with our bishop here on f4, really putting a lot of pressure on black. And once now it's nicely placed on e5, then it's really putting a lot of pressure on black here. Again, we're attacking the king with our queen, but also attacking this bishop here on f8 and indirectly attacking this queen here on d8. So even though white is down quite a bit in material, black was forced to resign here because he just didn't have the pieces to defend, and he didn't have as many active pieces as white did in the attack. So this is one way you can play the London system. Again, I highly recommend it for people, especially those just getting into chess. Very good way to learn how to develop all your pieces properly, and then you do have a lot of different options. Obviously in this game he chose to completely dominate the king side, but you do have options. You can castle on the king side, you can attack on the queen side. You do have a lot of options, but I did just want to show you. A lot of people think of this as a very passive opening because you're not really staking claim to anything in particular, and you're not really attacking right off the bat. But I did want to show, since myself I'm an aggressive player, I did want to show those players that wanted to try it out and are a little bit more aggressive that you do have options as far as attacking completely on one side, and you do have a lot of different options as far as sacrificing but still getting a lot of aggressive lines from all your pieces, since all your pieces are developed and they're in the game very active. So hope you guys enjoyed the London system. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.